Hello everybody and welcome back to the Capability Corner, the podcast where we explore what's happening in healthcare, workforce development and all things capability building. I'm Zoe Yule, Head of Learning and Capability at AusMed. I know we promised a follow-up episode on AI and that is still on its way, but while you wait, I've got something very special for you. This is a bonus episode, a conversation that I had with Rasa Kabaila, a mental health nurse practitioner, author and founder of her own practice. We chat all things psychological safety, what it looks like, why it's an absolute foundation of workforce capability. We'll connect it to key concepts like workforce retention and providing safe, high-quality care. Let's get straight into it. Very excited to be sitting face to face. I can almost touch you. There we go. With Rasa Kabalia. Rasa, welcome. How are you?
Thank you for having me here today. It's wonderful to be here with you, Zoe.
You've had a big day.
Yes.
We've just had a lovely lunch and now we're digesting. Our sympathetic nervous system switched off. The parasympathetics kicked in.
It's been a wonderful day. I was asked to do some presentations for AusMed, to filmed presentations to be on the website for learning and development, and so I did 5 this morning. So that's a record.
Unbelievable.
For me, a very new experience for me, but everyone has been super duper supportive and encouraging, and it's actually been a really wonderful experience.
That's lovely. Well, I've got to say, I was sitting in our studio here behind the big curtains, quietly working away, but secretly really enjoying and loving the topics that you explored. We looked at burnout, why people are actually leaving healthcare. You shared a lot of stories. You talked about boundaries. There was so much goodness in those lectures that I'm really excited to have be made available. But let's start with your background. Tell us a bit about yourself.
So I was born in 1988. I started working in the healthcare field when I was 15, working as a personal carer at a war veterans home. I had that as a placement for work experience. And initially, I didn't know what to expect. And when I first started in the role, I was just thinking, who would ever want to do this work? It is so hard. It is so emotionally and physically taxing. And then I grew to love that job. And so I think I was the youngest carer employed at the
50s?
in the high care dementia wing.
Wow.
So, it was like a baptism of fire. And I guess from that point onwards, did another work placement at a paediatric ward in rural New South Wales, which again, major eye-opener. But I was told all the way through that, I was being encouraged to take on a nursing role, a few other positions like working at a medical centre, working in the treatment room, being a phlebotomist, all those sorts of things. And then when I finished school, I decided to study to become a nurse.
Okay, so all of that was just while you're at school?
Yeah. But it's just,
Amassing experiences.
I wasn't really seeking it out. It just kind of happened that way, I guess. I enjoyed it, but I was pretty intimidated by it because I guess at that age, all your friends are partying and you're just kind of wanting to have fun. And they're very big concepts to kind of come to terms with. Just, I guess that was the start of my road into being a nurse, and I've been a nurse ever since.
Not just a nurse. Tell us about your nursing career.
So
in 50 words or less.
Oh yeah, I know. Thank you for reminding me that to keep it succinct. So I worked in ICU and emergency medical surgical PAL care to start off with as a new grad nurse, and then I did some rural and remote placements and some volunteer work overseas. Then filled in for a community mental health position. I was meant to be there for a month. And then I fell in love with it, and I was only meant to be there for a month because they were meant to get someone more experienced than me to stay in the field, but they couldn't find someone. So I ended up working in that role for 2.5 years, and I guess 10 years or so following that, I've since completed a Master of Mental Health Nursing and a Master of Nurse Practitioner qualification, and over the last few years I've been running my own practice. So yeah. That's sort of, I don't know, 65 words.
Yeah, that wasn't 50. But
sorry.
No, very, very impressive. Loved hearing about your experience working in healthcare before you even finished high school. But we love nurse practitioners. We absolutely think the role of the nurse practitioner is critical in healthcare. I think what you're providing within the community, but also within hospitals, within regional and rural, remote areas of our country is exceptional. But a mental health nurse practitioner, I talk about a role that encompasses so much. I'm really grateful to have this conversation with you because I think you as a person, but the role of a mental health nurse practitioner brings so much. And there's so much that I've learned about you, Russ, as being a contributor to the AusMed Toolbox. And when you take someone like you that has a clinical mental health background and go plonk, let's put you in a conversation around workforce capability. What gets thrown up, the ideas, the stories, the experiences are phenomenal. We've reflected over lunch about, psychological safety. And why I love psychological safety is because we can't do any of the things we want to do when it comes to building workforce capability without this phenomenal layer that is psychological safety. So let's dive into it. What is it? What is it? $1 million question. What's psychological safety?
Yeah, and I guess there are some things that are like concepts that are, again, 50 words or less, trying to explain that are hard to explain because they're not so tangible in some ways. But I guess, you and I were talking about how it feels and it's what it looks like. So you can see it in workplaces because you can see people looking quite relaxed. I think even in busy environments, being able to be themselves, people who look happy, seeing and experiencing open conversations and knowing that you can have open conversations about all sorts of things. It's very basic in some ways when you think about it in that way. Again, how is that produced in workplaces? I think it's really about the relationships between leadership and the staff on the ground.
I think we can feel it. We know when it's there and we can feel the benefits. And conversely, we can feel when it's not there and we can see the harm. Let's go into an example. Have you been in a workforce or a workplace where you've felt it, where you've felt psychologically safe as either a leader or a clinician or in any role that you've had as a carer? What did that feel like?
Absolutely. And again, through speaking this morning, I am bringing myself back to all the different kinds of workplaces that have provided me with these kinds of examples. With the first place that I had worked in mental health in the community that I mentioned earlier, that was definitely a place where I felt psychological safety. And I think in some ways I maybe took it for granted because in other workplaces, I just assumed that it would be the same. And so in terms of what it looked like, our team leader didn't feel like they were separate to us. So we had really open discussions as a team. He was really genuine and really transparent. I knew a little bit about his life, so we could connect as people. He always talked about how much he valued staff and he openly asked for feedback, and we were able to provide that in an open way for lots of different things in terms of clinical matters, but also working processes.
How did it feel working in that environment? Were there benefits to the care that you were providing because of the fact that you were operating in a psychologically safe environment?
Absolutely. The staff retention rates were great. One of my great friends who I worked with there still works for that team, and that's more than 10 years later. I think that's massive.
It's pretty rare. It's our key metric at AusMed.
Yeah.
Is staff retention. I don't want to sound biased, but I think we genuinely talk and think about psychological safety a lot. And that is represented in our tenure. On the topic, I've got to throw in, I think it's one of my all-time greatest jokes, and that is that our head of people and culture is called Tanya. And I said, Tanya, I think you need a New Zealand accent with your name. I think we got to call you Tanya rather than Tanya, because tenure is our key people metric. That I don't think that worked. We might have to scrap that bit. That probably didn't come across as funny as what it is in my brain, but I think that was a really good pun, that one. But I think you're right. You could start to measure the impact of psychological safety as an enabler or a contributor to some of these positive patient outcomes or outcomes for people in our care, but also people outcomes. So if we were thinking about, what metrics are there from a people and culture perspective that would help identify if you have or you haven't got it, then tenure, tenure is definitely one of them.
In terms of things like you said with the client outcomes and things, absolutely. Like our team was one of the busiest in the whole region, and we had a very complex caseload. We all had quite a high caseload, but all of us were able to deliver fantastic outcomes. And I think it's because we all really appreciated each other, and we were really led and supported by a fantastic leader. And it always meant I was always happy to go the extra mile.
Absolutely.
And because I knew that it was validated, and I really wanted to work and support for my team. Like I was able to keep that initiative all the way through. I mean, I chose to work in that particular workplace. I'd been offered work in a place that would have been walking distance to where I lived. And instead I took the place that had the 40-minute commute. And the place that was close to where I lived actually I would have had a smaller caseload. And I chose to work in that team that was on the other side of where I lived. And I worked there for years because it had such a good work culture. And I had been told that the place that was closer to where I lived had a really negative work culture with a lot of bullying. And so for me, I was like, it doesn't matter. Like I have to work with the team that supports me.
And what I'm hearing from what you say, Rasa, is that a good psychologically safe environment obviously has such a positive impact on workplace culture in general.
Absolutely. It's paramount.
In your example of what that positive workplace culture and feeling psychologically safe enabled, took me back to the ward where I felt safe. If I think about it, it's where I felt safe. And interestingly, it was in intensive care, which is possibly, one of the most challenging environments where there is the highest risk to feel unsafe because of the complexity, the acuity as a graduate and a novice nurse, around these terribly sick people with all these machines and equipment and buzzers, balloon pumps, all these things that I'm at the very infancy of my career and seeing. I felt safe, if I think about it, because of the leader of the person that was running our ward. And this is a shout out to Ali Brown, who is a mentor, still is a mentor and beautiful friend of mine, and many people that I know, for being an absolute rock. And if I think about the environment that she created, stability, what you see is what you get. Had that open door policy where even though her office, poorly designed, old ward, her manager's office, nurse unit manager right at the end of the corridor, always had the door open. You could ask the questions. Ask as a novice nurse what I felt at the time were those silly questions. And you could be vulnerable. And you could say, and I remember my grandma passed away when I was working in intensive care as a grad. I felt really, really bad for calling in sick. I took a week of personal leave, only about a week into my rotation in ICU. And I thought, oh my gosh, but my grandma was living with us. There was no way I wanted to not be there for her and my family. But it meant I had to take a lot of time off. And I'd take one day off at a time, just sort of see how it went. And then I reckon it was about Wednesday in that week. And Ali said, Zoe, I just want you to take the rest of the week off. And she gave us that permission to, and the ease, I still felt guilty for taking that time off, but she gave us that permission to think I can, as you said, be myself. And I think I provided some of the best care in that environment. So thank you for sharing your positive example. And I hope everyone that's listening has had that good environment, that is thinking back to that workplace, that team, that place. And it might not be in healthcare. It could be in any different environment where we had that great culture, and to be starting to join the dots of why this psychological safety. Yes, it's a legislation. Yes, it's in the standards. Yes, we've got laws around it. Yes, it's important for work health and safety. But what it is, it's that feeling that we all want. We all want to come to work in a place that is positive, is happy, it's enabling, it's supportive. We can connect our values to the work that we do. But sometimes we also got to give the bad picture just to really drive home the point. What does bad look like? When psychological safety isn't present, what do you think happens? And have you got an example of when that might be the case?
I guess the opposite of what I described with my first workplace.
Have you been there? Do you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, of course, of course.
What the opposite is?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I had a stark contrast from from that workplace to years later going to a different workplace and feeling a very different leadership and management style. And I felt it straight away. Your body tells you things. I think your body, you can feel it. Like you usually have like a bad feeling in your stomach. You don't feel at ease. You kind of feel hypervigilant. And I guess there's going to be some of that when you're new in a workplace because it's different. Just the things of seeing people who don't look like they're relaxed, seeing people who don't look happy. I remember having conversations with the management team, not requesting, but just asking about what kinds of things they could do to sort of support me and accommodate me with the different parts of my roles, because there was a lot of things being expected of me, which I was happy to deliver, but it just didn't seem to really match up in the hours that I would have been at work. And I just got met with, no, we can't do this. And you just have to basically do what we tell you to do. Obviously not in those words, but not with any kind of validation or understanding of where I was coming from. It felt like there was just a great divide between leadership and myself. I felt isolated. I questioned my abilities. And these are always like the themes that I would see in particular workplaces where psychological safety wasn't there.
The words that you're describing in my mind is, it's this distance, this disconnect. And we know healthy boundaries are important. It's sort of this elongating distance between management, our leadership, and the team. And it need not be. We do need a boundary. We need to have role clarity. But what I'm seeing and hearing doesn't feel great. How do you think that impacted the care that you provided in that role? Was it impacted by this environment?
I don't know if the care I provided in that particular role was affected, but I left the role prematurely. And again, ongoing themes in my career and things, if I felt like I've had an elongated period of time where I haven't been supported or valued, I end up leaving the role earlier than what I anticipate, and leave the role just sort of feeling like I'm not good at what I do and I don't like what I do, which is usually a point past burnout, I'd say.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay.
I think that's the loss, right? That's the loss. It's the loss to your sense of professional identity and sense of self, but also the organisation. We know you're an amazing nurse practitioner. You've got incredible skills and expertise to offer a role. And if it's not accepted, encouraged, and if a particular environment isn't conducive to psychological safety, I think it's clear people walk. So I think any conversation that we have around psychological safety also has to think more broadly and holistically about overall workplace health and safety. Sadly, we still see such high rates of occupational violence and aggression. Is there a link between the two? If we improve psychological safety in the workplace, do we see the benefits of improved physical safety, and vice versa?
Absolutely, we do. I think, again, if we sort of tie in psychological safety with burnout, because they're not such different sort of terms, I guess. If people don't feel safe to be able to talk about things, or when they talk about things, it's met with resistance or contempt or not being supported with those things, then that's when people tend to be doing more than they feel capable of being able to do in terms of workload. It means they're starting to do jobs that they are not actually equipped to do. And then the cycle continues. So people then don't feel that they can say, I'm feeling overworked. I don't feel capable of doing this, because they're worried about what the response will be. I know for me personally, I'm sure you can probably appreciate this, Zoe, or anyone listening today, is you're so much more likely to be making mistakes
Mm.
and also making not great decisions when you're put under duress or you are overstretched. Like, I think anyone in any role can probably
Absolutely.
appreciate that. But I think of a particular workplace, and I know, like they had wanted me to keep working there, and I lasted there about 6 months, which probably tells you something. And I always think, every workplace I'll always learn different things. I'll learn so much about myself, about other people, clinical skills, and I'm grateful for all the experience I've had. But in terms of things when we look at work culture, I was one of two nurses working on the team. And so, every person who we had to see who was very, very high risk in lots of ways, we were there to go and give them their injectable antipsychotic medication, which is actually a really big role, and you're going to see people at home who probably don't want to see you for various reasons. And you're there basically trying to give them a medication that they are mandated to have by law. And so it's a hard position to be in, and it's not something that you just kind of run into people's homes and, just be like, okay, here for your injection. Like, it doesn't work like that. But because of the amount of clients that we had and the expectations that were put on them, it really was a thing of just kind of going out, and it was just like, I'm there with a mission with this needle. And I'm bringing up this example because I think it does tie in psychological and physical safety. They're not necessarily so different from each other. But I had concerns when we had gone to someone's house. The person who was living in a care home at the time, her bedroom had then been moved to the end of the corridor, where before it was closer to the entrance. So already it changed it. It was down a long, narrow corridor. Basically, if people have been obliged to have mandated treatment for their own risks for themselves or others, if people have denied having the treatment, you're then meant to go through a pathway to essentially get police involved to make sure, and hospital, so that you can make sure that person gets their treatment. This team didn't want to do that because they didn't want to break rapport with clients. But the problem then is that you have people who are psychotic who are then becoming more and more psychotic. And at that point, I don't think rapport is really, you're not going to be able to bridge more rapport at that point. So that was the situation with this client. And I got told she doesn't like women and she's psychotic. The other male nurse wasn't there that day, so it was just me. So I went there. Her room had moved to the end of the corridor. So there's already like lots of flags here that I'm seeing that I'm like, okay, this is a concern, this is a concern, this is a concern. And I got told, if you knock on her door and she stays in her room, but she opens the door for you or lets you in, we consider that as consent. She's like, that's how we consider it, as she's consenting to it. And you just go in the room and give her the injection. And all of that for me made me feel extremely uncomfortable. Everything in my body said, this isn't right. I had voiced my concerns, but I kind of knew the pressures that were put on me and my concerns weren't really listened to. So I went down the corridor, and as I'm walking down the corridor, I'm thinking, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea, this is a bad idea. And ever when I've had a feeling like that in my gut, it always plays out that way. And I'm someone who I'm not someone who gets spooked pretty easily. So when I know that's coming up for me, I know it means something. And anyway, I knocked on the door, and the person opened the door, and I was explaining who I was, and I couldn't hear anything back. And anyway, and then she came out and just like launched at me and just started hitting me. And so I was like being assaulted and trying to run away at the same time down this corridor. And then I had, physically, because I'm like, I think I was a bit bigger than the client and I can run. I think because of that, physically, I wasn't really hurt, which was a relief. Told the manager about it, who was not a nurse. She was saying, do you need time off? Like, do you want to do this? I said, no, I don't need time off. I'm fine. But what I want to do is put an alert on the file and have a team agreement that if this person or if anyone refuses their medication, then we follow down that pathway and we consider that to be a refusal, and we walk away, and we don't go and push to go into people's rooms. We take it that if they come out to the lounge room, we've got other support workers there and doctors or anyone else there, then that's okay, but not to go and persevere through these things. And she said, well, I just want to keep it to the individual's discretion as to how they want to manage that. And I thought, I've been assaulted and that's not enough. And unfortunately, what happened later is that there was someone who was a lot smaller than me in that same situation who got seriously assaulted by the same person later. And, you know, that resulted in me leaving the job. And I just kind of thought it was just, really discouraging.
Thanks for sharing that, Rasa. I think sadly that happens too often. Although a lot of what we've discussed has centered around as leaders, as managers, clinicians, how we as people conduct ourselves, it's actually got to be evident in policies and processes as well.
Yeah.
It starts from the ground up, from the mindset, from a policy, from people, through to culture, through to leadership.
It really does. And I think it was actually a mentor of mine who was a psych reg at the time. He ended up joining that team. But by that point, I had decided, I was like, I can't, you know, I knew my time was up when that had happened, because I thought, you know, I can't be here any longer. Yeah. And he had said to me, he's like, I really want you to stay. Like, will you stay now that I'm working here? And I just said, like, I can't get past how that's been managed. But it was good to see, like what you said with those practical examples, Zoe. So he had said in the period that I was there, but I had already put in my resignation, he had said, and he led the way with that. And he said, I don't want this to come up again. He said, we have had too many nurses who have been assaulted because of these situations. And he said, you know, if someone is mandated by law to have their medication, and we have a process, and we do, there's a proper process in place as to what we need to do, he said, we action it. We action it at that time because we need to protect our nurses. And I cannot see any more nurses who I know getting assaulted, because there's, again, if we think about culture of things, like I've read things of people saying that they've had, you know, get a concussion from someone throwing a toaster at them, and then someone in management saying, well, you wanted to work in mental health, so what do you expect? So it's not to say, I'm not saying it's all like that. It's absolutely not. Like, I've had wonderful leaders, but I think in the same token, with that example, how great that was to see someone then, but then did we have to wait till it was a psychiatrist to have to be able to introduce those new changes?
Yeah, with so much of our workforce in the community, in homes, providing, you know, in-home care or care to participants with a disability, you know, we have to have those policies in place that extend beyond, you know, a physical environment where care is being provided.
And they help everyone. Like,
exactly.
Even with this example that I gave, there was no benefit to that client. They just became more psychotic by letting this slip. They became more unwell. That's a disservice to them. And it's also a disservice to them to be given no boundaries of knowing how they are meant to work with staff, because that's not going to fly anywhere else. That's what has people getting charged for particular things.
Absolutely. All right, I want to move into, you know, more about what we can actually do. We're nurses. We love the practical stuff. We love actionable strategies and examples that might give an aha moment. Let's start with a leader coming into an existing culture. I think, you know, very often can we create from scratch, unless you're in a startup, you know, a new, literally new organization. Often it's walking into a role, whether you're people culture, team leader, L&D, you know, there's a lot of mergers, acquisitions happening, particularly in aged care, you know, that can create quite volatile conditions for people. So let's start with leaders coming into an existing culture. Maybe they're getting a sense that this isn't a psychologically safe environment, both for them, but particularly for the people in their team. Where could they start?
I think having open conversations and asking your staff what they need. Ask them about things that, I mean, that's what I've done, working in new roles and leadership roles, and asking everyone, you know, what's been working so far, what hasn't been working, what would you like to see, and then working out together practically what that looks like, and starting to try all those different things.
Yeah, love it. That's called a SWOT analysis.
Oh, it is?
Rasa, there's a thing for that, but it's exactly that. I'd add in something there, Rasa, and I'm sure you bring with you, and that's values. Understanding at the core, what matters to us as leaders, all roads lead back to core values.
They do.
Helping someone feel enabled, appreciated. Guess what? It's when the core values are expressed in the workplace.
Absolutely.
And then on the flip side, why am I getting resistance? Or why have I got an issue? What's happened here? Not what's wrong, what's happened. And it's a core value's been triggered, a lack of appreciation or not feeling trusted, or for whatever reason. It's a really enabling way to work with people when we know our values.
100% it is. I had spoken in one of the presentations about values this morning, and it's actually a core thing that I talk about in terms of mentorship and also in therapy for the mental health side of things. Is the very first exercise that I do with people is from acceptance and commitment therapy, and that is establishing your values and looking at them in terms of the importance to you, how much energy you've put in, how much energy you want to put in that going forward, reflecting on that with words that underpin your values, and then looking at what your goals are based on your values, because we often think it's about achievements and how things look on paper, but actually what's important is like working in alignment to your values. So I think,
Absolutely.
and like you said, you can just, and you know, you'll have your own values, people will have their own individual values, but then you will also have the values of a team. And I think having them as, you know, buzzwords is not enough.
Nah,
I think
it can't be on the wall. Like,
yeah,
great if you've gone through a process as a company or, you know, as a team and boom, beautiful poster on the wall. That's great. But you got to live them. If you're listening and you can't rattle off 3, 4 minimum, not over, minimum 5 core values, do the exercise. It is a really phenomenal exercise. It's simple. You just Google list of values. Do that because it is a game changer. Coming back to some of these simple things, what about a staff member, a team member that is in an environment where perhaps they're not feeling the full extent of psychological safety? Change doesn't always have to come from above. It can be driven from numerous places. What do you suggest, simple things that someone in that position could do?
I think having someone trusted that you can speak with quite openly about things is important, like having a trusted colleague, or having someone in a management or a mentorship position where you can talk about things. I mean, when it's a new workplace and you're trying to kind of work out the lay of the land and there's a bit of information overload, I think even if it's a good workplace can still be quite overwhelming. So I think having those discussions is important. I was taught by a mentor when I was working in emergency. She was saying, you know, try and work out what the workplace, what you think it's maybe missing or maybe needs more of, and see where you can fill that place. So for me, that was always what I tried to adopt with working in different workplaces. And so for me, there were things like, you know, for me, I was arranging things like socially for people because I kind of would think, okay, well, that's something that I think is missing. I know in other workplaces, it was like trying to support people to have moments to be able to like unwind and de-stress. And I've done that through clinical supervision and also different kinds of mindfulness activities. For other places where I felt like some of the roles weren't understood, I was like, well, I can provide education in those areas. So you can also mention those things to, you know, people in other leadership roles too, and give them those ideas and have those discussions at team meetings. I guess what I will say with that, though, is that there needs to be someone there in the line that you feel comfortable speaking with. And I guess my personal experience is if you have problems in the line all the way up, then it's time to go. But usually there are people who are there. Usually you'll have different personalities, and some people you feel more comfortable with than others.
Person.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's end. One final takeaway for our audience. They want to make a change tomorrow. What's the single most impactful thing that they could start doing tomorrow that would foster psychological safety within their team or their organisation?
Be genuine and work on ways to have genuine rapport with your staff.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much, Rasa.
Thank you so much, Zoe.
It's been a pleasure to speak with you today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. And if you're interested in reading more than just the toolbox articles that Russ has contributed, you've written the book.
I have.
Would you like to end by telling our listeners about the fabulous book, which I have read and I particularly love the title? Go on, give it a plug. You're allowed to.
Thank you. I'm glad I stuck on to the title with that, and it somehow got through that title as an academic book. Yeah. So the book is called Put Some Concrete in Your Breakfast, Tales from Contemporary Nursing, which is and I have this kind of this nice giggle from another nurse. Then I know that I got it right with the title. But it's a book that is a collection of really heartfelt stories from nurses and telling the stories of nurses in all their entirety. So the heartwarming, the heartbreaking, the difficult, the strange, spiritual elements of the job, working with death and dying, talking about things like suicidality, touching a lot of the big topics. And it's really a way to celebrate nurses and also to talk about the honest accounts and also ways to be able to work with some of the beautiful and also very challenging things we work in within our roles. And it discusses that from, I guess, my journey and journeys of other people who've been in the field for quite some time, from being early career nurses until now, and talking about, what's kept them in the field and what helps to keep people going in the field. So I guess it's a way to promote nurses and also to encourage people who are considering studying nursing or people who are studying nursing or early career nurses or any kind of nurses, who just, I guess, want to feel validated in their journey and who can resonate with those stories.
100%. And my pitch to the people and culture, to the governance, to the CEOs, directors, whoever's listening from that end, is if you want to know what actually happens to not just nurses, but obviously particularly nurses, and how you keep them, read this book.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Thank you for having me here today. AusMed, honestly, the just paramount in terms of psychological safety. I'm not just saying that because I'm here on your podcast today, but honestly, it's been so refreshing to be able to see, to be able to work alongside a organisation where we share the same values, but also just who all just look so happy and really support each other and are so genuine and open, and it's just a breath of fresh air and it really keeps me motivated. So thank you for having me along.
Oh, thank you, Rasa. This conversation reminded me that psychological safety isn't a nice to have, but it's actually a need to have. It's what keeps people engaged, learning, and staying safe in their role. So here's my challenge to you. What's one thing you can do this week to make your team a place people want to stay? A huge thank you to Rasa for her honesty and insights. You'll find links to Rasa's articles on the AusMed Toolbox and her book, Put Some Concrete in Your Breakfast, in the show notes. As always, please reach out to podcasts@ausmed.com.au. Connect with us on LinkedIn. We love hearing from you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back next episode. Until then, take care.